I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Amherst Exempted Village Board of Education. Can we start with the, start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Mrs. Giuffredo?
Mrs. Neidert,
Here.
Mrs. Gillis, here. Mr. Engel,
Here.
Mr. Yacobozi,
Here.
and Mr. Zappa.
Here.
Now take a recommendation to approve the agenda as presented, including any addendums.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Yacobozi moved. Zappa second. Any discussion? Roll call, please, Mrs. Giuffredo.
Mr. Yacobozi,
Aye.
Mr. Zappa,
Aye.
Mr. Engel,
Aye.
Mrs. Gillis,
Aye.
Mrs. Neidert.
Aye. And now we'll move on with the treasurer's report, Mrs. Giuffredo.
Good evening, board. This evening, I just want to quickly go over the financials to date. I'll just give it to you instead of showing a document on the screen. So far this year, as of the end of May, we are up $831,767 in revenue over last May. And we also have 1,186,451 greater expenditures than last year. All total, we still have revenue exceeding expenditures this year over 2.1 million. And we have added 443,000 in cash balance over last May. We will have much decreased revenue in the month of June. We'll have no more real estate revenue before the end of the fiscal year, and we will only receive a net of about 145,000 in each of the last two foundation settlements. So June will be a period of greater expenditures than revenue. But year to date, we're still doing really well. We just recently had the 5-year forecast presentation. So then the next thing I want to talk about is item 6D, I believe, is the SORSA renewal. And SORSA is the Schools of Ohio Risk Sharing Authority. And it's the insurance consortium with which we use for property, casualty, and fleet insurances. The document shows that our total premium this coming year is nearly $150,000. What I will say is this is an increase of around $9,000 over last year. But please recall that we have a brand new building, 119,000 square foot building we had to add to our property values. So just so you know what's going on with the insurance renewal, and that will begin on July 1st. Then just before the meeting, the board president, the superintendent, and myself met for the local records commission meeting. And we gave an update on the records project and the continuing scanning and disposal of records. And the local records commission approved a variety of records for disposal. Both the superintendent and I presented a disposal schedule for this evening. And then the last item that I want to talk about is most typically the treasurer asks for a special meeting in June toward the end of the month. So Thursday, Friday, June 25th or 26th, or Monday or Tuesday, June 29th or 30th at your disposal. I would guess it would only be a 10-minute meeting, if that, and it's just to facilitate year end fiscal year end, as well as gearing up with temporary appropriations for the coming year. That's the end of my report.
Okay. Do you want to try to set the date for that meeting right now? Mrs.
That is
Giuffredo?
up to the board. Mhm.
Yes?
Yes,
Can you go through the dates again that you want to take a look at?
yes. The last 4 business days of the month are Thursday, June 25th, Friday, June 26th, Monday, June 29th, and Tuesday, June 30th. Anything is fine with me.
So do we want to give you like the most amount of time and try for Tuesday, June 30th?
June
That will
29th.
not work.
Okay,
June 30th will not work for me. I'll be out of commission that day.
okay.
June 29th? Does that work for everyone?
We're doing this in the morning or afternoon?
It is totally up to the board.
Want to do it 7:30 in the morning again?
7:30 on the 29th?
Yes. Does that work for the board?
That
Does
should
for
work,
me.
yes.
So that's the
Okay.
29th, 7:30.
Correct.
Yes,
June
Teresa.
29th at 7:30.
Yes, Teresa, you'll have to get up early.
Who's bringing me breakfast?
And that will also be
and
a
that's
Zoom meeting.
That's another question. I mean, a Zoom meeting would be fine.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay,
Rex, I can handle that. I can still wear my PJs.
all right.
Good.
I
You don't have
will,
to bring.
pardon me?
I said that way we don't have to take Teresa anything. No
I will
donuts.
post a
My
special
house.
meeting notice then.
Okay, and that's the end of your report, Mrs. Giuffredo?
The end of my report.
Okay, I would
Hey,
take a
hey,
motion
Bud,
for
hey,
the,
Val, can I say something right here? Everybody needs to remember that any kind of tiny voice or any kind of noise that you make, it reflects and it gives like, like when you see somebody's line underneath their name or by their name, that means they're making a noise and everybody can hear it. And I had a hard time hearing some of her report because there's feedback coming from other people. So I don't know if we want to suggest everybody mute yourself when someone's speaking so that we can hear, because I'm having a hard time.
okay. Perfect. All right, so can I have a motion for the treasurer's recommendations 6A through 6E, please?
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Engel, seconded by Teresa. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Giuffredo, roll call, please.
Mr. Engel,
Aye.
Mrs. Gillis, Mr. Yakobozzi,
Sorry.
Aye.
Mr. Zappa,
Aye.
Mrs. Snyder.
Aye. Man, you guys are making me earn my keep today. Whew. Okay, we'll move on to the superintendent's report, Mr. Sayers.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a couple of items here. First of all, a buildings and grounds update. The Powers demo project is moving along very, very well. And as I understand it, we should be completed by the end of June. So that process is moving along nicely. The modulars at Nord have also been removed and that process has been completed. Next step will be for that parking area to be finished there where the modulars were located these last couple of 2-3 years. So again, the modulars are gone and Mr. Grimmett is now working to have that parking lot area repaired and additional parking in those places. And then also the concession stand project at the high school is moving along very, very nicely and is scheduled to be completed by the end of July. Mr. Grimmett is monitoring that project very carefully, and we will certainly keep you posted on that. The other item, as we talked last month, and the board has probably heard this, read this in the newspaper, that the governor has indicated that he wants to see schools reopen in August. And to that end, we've had a couple of administrative meetings where we've done a lot of brainstorming and looked at a lot of different scenarios as we think about what school in August could look like. And at the same time, the health commissioner has said to us as recently as Friday that he would encourage us to hold off at least until the end of June, early July, because there should be some additional guidance coming out over these next 3 or 4 weeks. So again, we've had a lot of different discussion, and I know Mr. Molnar is going to share some things as part of his report, some information that we've gathered from our staff as, again, we look back to what happened this spring, and at the same time using that to help us as we plan for the fall. So the process is underway. Things are moving forward. I also did send out a blast email to our parents. I think there's maybe 4,000 emails that we have when we send out a blast email. So our parents are up to date. They know that we're working and developing different scenarios. But again, it will probably be late June, early July before we have additional information that will be available. And that completes my report.
Anyone have any questions on the report? Steve, can you clarify for us again on the on the power site? Is that once they get everything cleared out of there, is that just going to be seeded?
Yes, the short-term plan is for that to be seeded. That's actually a part of the project, is for the seeding to take place. And then there are no immediate plans for that site for the next year. One of the things that Mr. Grimmett is interested in seeing is how the drainage will work on that site. Obviously, there's no building there anymore, so we're kind of curious before we start making plans for the future to see what's going to happen in terms of drainage and heavy rainfalls, that type of thing. But short term, yes, there will be seeding that will take place in the not too distant future.
And then a follow up to that, the power sign that's in front, is that going to be moved or remain there, or?
Yes, that's a good question. I'm going to check. I think Chuck has had some conversation with Tim Reaney about that sign. And the last I understood, that sign will be moved from that site and placed in storage temporarily until until we determine how or where we want to utilize that sign. But
Okay.
I will double check with Mr. Grimmett on that tomorrow. I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago when we talked about that, because we want to make sure that that sign is preserved. And
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly where they were thinking about having it stored, but I believe that that was the plan.
Okay, perfect. And then there'll be seating over at Nord also, where the trailer was.
Actually, where the one trailer, the older trailer
Yeah.
that had been there for a number of years, that will actually be seated. And then the other area where we had the 2 trailers that we moved over from Harris, that area will actually be additional parking.
So they're just going to fix the holes that are there, and then
That's
we'll have
correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll pick up actually a significant number of parking places there.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to the administrative committee reports. We'll start with Mr. Molnar.
Thank you. So last meeting last month, I talked about I was looking forward to the Lorraine County Teachers Collaborative that we were going to have taking place. And Amherst did participate. We had 22 teachers participate out of about 140 in the county. So we had about 15% from Amherst. They did a wonderful job on May 20th, kind of collaborating and discussing how online learning and home instruction went over the last few months. We were able to take that information, and then on Friday, May 22nd, our administrative team, principals and assistant principals, met for about a half day to review that, again, with other county administrators as well. And we got a lot of great information about how we did, and also what instructional materials and programs and things we used. And it was just a great information that we received from all of the teachers. Following that, we decided to expand upon that, and I created an actual Amherst teacher survey that went to all the teachers. And because we had some great feedback from those 22, I wanted to see if it mirrored everyone else. So we actually had 139 of our teachers reply to a survey, which was excellent. And they took a lot of time. We had a couple open-ended questions, and I had 4 to 5 pages for each question of open-ended answers from from all the teachers in the district, from all the buildings. And I created a survey so it was by building, because sometimes even the questions were the same for everyone. How you might answer it might differ between elementary or junior high or high school. So we got a lot of great feedback. We compiled the data. At an administrative meeting last Thursday, we reviewed that data and talked a little bit more about it. So right now, I'm about 80% done of compiling it. We also discussed we wanted to share that back to the teachers. They did so much work and effort and did a great job of sharing all of their thoughts with us. We wanted to give back to them and let them know what all their colleagues said. So I'm preparing that. Within the next day or two, I'll give the survey results kind of back to the teachers, and I'd be happy to share it with you, the board, as well when I do that. And again, I think we're in great shape as we prepare for the fall, even though, as Superintendent Sayers mentioned, we're probably going to hopefully start kind of like normal. We just gain a lot of great feedback from students and parents and teachers to know as we move forward just what to focus on. It was just great information to focus on what professional development teachers need. We've grown quite a bit with technology and how to be engaged with students and interact. And I think one of the biggest things we learned was how important relationships are. That was a factor that came up in so many answers about relationships and connecting with kids, having a personal connection with them. I think it's strengthened a lot of what we do and made us really focus on what's most important, which are the kids and our relationships with them. So that's just where we're at right now as we move forward. And I think that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Molnar. Move on to Mr. Engel. I can't hear anything.
You're right, you can't, because I just want to say that the celebration or the graduation from JBS went very well. I think that worked out fine. Again, we've had some discussion about what class will look like next fall, especially from a lab perspective, and we're asking lots of questions of how that will come to be, but have no answers yet, because it's a whole different ball game when you're dealing with certain labs. But otherwise, I think the school year ended very well. We're hiring a few new people. And unless you have a specific question, Teresa, I would just let you know that all the flowers that did not get sold this year because there was not a greenhouse sale, all was donated to the metro parks and is being used in the metro parks.
Perfect.
So,
very good.
Unless you all would have a question for me.
Rex, do you like Teresa being muted?
Hey.
At her request, she's muted, so we can say those things. You can't come back. If it had been Cookie, she could have been unmuted really quick.
Right. Do we have any other?
All right. Has a question for me.
Anybody have any questions for Rex today? Okay, Steve, are there any other committee reports that we need to hear from?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, then we'll move on to personnel recommendations with you.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Neidert. A number of personnel items here, and I know the board's had an opportunity to review these, but I did want to just highlight a couple of these items. The first one is a recommendation to employ Lindsay Dotson. This work is to continue with our scanning. We started this last year and continuing to digitize our records. And we want to restart that and get that going again here this summer. And that's what Lindsay will be doing. And then I also wanted to highlight item F of the sub-rate recommendations for the upcoming school year. And those rates for all of those positions, substitutes, teachers, certified positions, as well as for our support staff, those rates are exactly the same as what they were for this past school year. And then finally, the other item that I wanted to draw attention to is item J. This is a recommendation to approve the revised discretionary funds. And as the board may recall, last month we actually approved these. But we discovered in reviewing those that there were a couple of errors, and some of the things that were approved were not in compliance with the collective bargaining agreement. So what we did is we went back to each of the building principals and we re-looked at all of the discretionary funds, made the necessary adjustments, and just wanted to make sure that we had the board reapprove these to make sure for auditing purposes that everything we're approving is in compliance with the collective bargaining agreement. So I wanted to highlight that in case you were wondering why we're doing this 2 months in a row. And at this time, would like to recommend personnel items 9A through 9L.
So move.
Moved by Rex, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Zappa. Anybody have any questions or comments? Teresa?
I just wanted to make a comment and say what a wonderful job that Mr. Caddell and Mr. Tellier did for graduation. I thought that they both did an outstanding job. I think the community was really pleased with the whole outcome, and I think a lot of them were very surprised of everything that the district did for graduation. So I just want to thank them, and Dina too. She did a fabulous job with all the lunches for all the students. I know the people in the community really did appreciate that as well.
Steve, I have a question on letter K.
Yes.
Is that really for the 1920 school year, or is it for next year?
Yes, this was an item that was should have been approved just as we left in March with the shutdown. And this was a supplemental that I don't remember if we had our March board meeting was just before the shutdown or just after.
It was just right.
It might have been just before. But be that as it may, this one got missed. And we need, before we can obviously pay that position in accordance with our memorandum of understanding that we entered into and that the board approved with the Amherst Teachers Association, before we can pay that supplemental, we have to have it board approved. So again, this was just one of those that, as all that was happening in March, was missed. And again, we want to make sure that everything is compliant and puts us in a good position from an auditing standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have anything else? Hearing nothing, we'll have roll call. Mrs. Giuffredo?
Mr. Engel,
Aye.
Mr. Zappa,
Aye.
Mrs. Gillis,
Aye.
Mr. Yakobozzi,
Aye.
and Mrs. Neidert.
Aye. Moving on to educational recommendations, Mr. Sayers?
Yes, thank you. Just one item that I wanted to highlight, and that is item B, and that is a recommendation to approve our handbooks. And I just wanted to commend, actually, Amy and Mike worked very carefully with our 4 building principals to update our attendance language. We had some disparities from building to building in our handbooks in terms of our attendance policies and procedures. And the board, actually, you may recall that I think it was either February or March, we updated our board policies. And one of the policies that we updated was our attendance policy. So we went back and reviewed our handbooks to ensure that all 4 buildings were consistent in complying with what's actually in board policy. So that was a real point of emphasis in updating these handbooks. And I just wanted to point that out because I know there was a lot of time and effort that went into that. And that's really the only other thing I wanted to mention with this particular section. Would like to recommend approval of items 10A through 10E.
I would like to mention something about the handbooks as an aside. So now we know that Ohio Revised Code is congruent to our board policy, which is congruent to all of the attendance language in our handbook. So hopefully this will just make it much more straightforward when recording attendance. Isn't that right, Mr. Sayers?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the process, we believe, has been streamlined. We've had multiple meetings with our principals as well as our building secretaries, who really are the ones that are handling attendance calls and attendance questions on a day in, day out basis. And again, this is a real point of emphasis for us. And we want to make sure everything's lined up from a policy and handbook standpoint. And then obviously we have to make sure that that's actually implemented.
I would have a question about the handbook as well. Did we update, and I did not look specifically at every handbook, did we update anything in the handbook about a situation or something like we had happen this year, mid-year, from that perspective at all?
You mean as far as going out of traditional school as we know it?
Yes, yes.
I don't think there were any changes made specifically for that. One of the things that we've been getting are regular legal updates from our state superintendents association, and that's something we haven't seen in terms of changing the handbooks to address that. So as far as I know, it might correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, the handbooks are very similar to what they were this last year.
Well, I think we should probably just check with legal to make sure that we shouldn't have anything in there, because I know that, we've had to pass and do a few things right along as this pandemic has happened. And if it should reoccur, I think that if we could be ahead of the curve before we print that, as long as we have legal's opinion on it, it would be a good idea.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to follow up on that tomorrow.
Okay, can we have a motion for 10A through E, please?
I'll make.
So-
Teresa
so
made the
moved.
motion.
Ronald second.
Ron second. Anybody have any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please. Mrs. Giuffredo?
Mrs. Gillis. Aye. Mr. Yakobozzi.
Aye.
Mr. Engel.
Aye.
Mr. Zappa.
Aye.
And Mrs. Snyder.
Aye. Moving on to business recommendations, Mr. Sayers?
Again, just 3 items here, and these are 3 very standard common items for this time of year. Our lunch prices, as you can see, are there, and we've held our lunch prices to be the same. We're recommending that our lunch prices next year remain the same as what they were this past year. So at this time, would like to recommend approval of items 11A through 11C.
So moved.
Rex moved. Mark second.
Good.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, Mrs. Giuffredo?
Mr. Engel.
Aye.
Mr. Zappa.
Aye.
Mrs. Gillis. Aye. Mr. Yakobozzi.
Aye.
Mrs. Snyder.
Aye. And then no need for executive session, Mr. Sayers? Or-
That is correct. I didn't know if, Mrs. Snyder, if you wanted to bring up the July board meeting.
Yeah, let's talk about that right now. The board office is officially opening again, and I think it's probably time for us to go back to having, of course, it won't be the exact same meeting that we used to have, but having an in-person meeting. And I know we're currently scheduled to have our meeting at the board office in July, but I think if we move back to the high school, it would allow us more space to be able to spread out. And I think July will be a good time to start having our in-person meetings again, because typically we don't have a lot of visitors at the July meeting. So we can see how that'll work out. So we'll keep the same date, but we'll plan on having our July meeting at the high school. Can you take care of it?
July 13th?
Yeah, can you take care of that, Mr. Sayers, to make sure that's okay for the
Absolutely.
building?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay.
I
Okay,
have another
yeah,
question on another
yes, go
topic.
ahead, Teresa.
Steve, I was just wondering, somebody talked to me today, that's why I didn't say anything earlier. What are we doing about the New Powers Elementary playground and having people play on it?
We actually just, Mr. Grimmett and I just talked about that this morning. And we're going to follow up with our health commissioner. Typically what happens is once information is disseminated at the state level, and I believe it was late last week, I'm not sure the exact date, but I believe it was late last week that the governor indicated that playgrounds could open. I think it's on June the 10th. There's just been so many dates as far as different things opening up, but I think the playground date was scheduled to be June 10th. Mr. Grimmett and I talked about it this morning. I'm going to follow up, check in with Dave Koval, our Lorraine County Health Commissioner, get his thoughts on specifically school playgrounds. and then, of course, follow his guidance. So yes, it's funny you mentioned that because we were just talking about it this morning.
Thank you.
Anything else, anyone?
I would just add one thing, not about that, but over at Powers, I've walked over there several times. We need to make sure that the landscaping people or the grounds people get rid of the dead pine tree that's there. It's at the entrance by the playground, over by the Board of Education office. Out in the middle there's a dead pine that is, it looks dreadful.
Rex, it's so funny you mentioned that has come up numerous times. And I know Chuck has followed up with Tim Rainey, and the landscape contractors are supposed to be back out because there are some other things that need to be addressed as well. But certainly that pine tree, given its location.
That pine tree jumps right out to like, I'm dead.
Yeah, given its location, it's a tree that everybody sees.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we definitely have plans to get that addressed. And there's some other things that we need to address as well. So
Steve, will that tree be replaced? Because it wasn't buried correctly to begin with, and they were supposed to I don't know if they ever did it or not. So will that be replaced?
yes, my understanding is it'll be a new tree. In fact, I'm going to make a note. We've got our monthly core meeting this Friday, and which would be, of course, a good time to bring that up just to make sure that that gets addressed.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
Steve,
speaking of the core meeting, Ron, are you going to make it? Because if you're not, Val may want to attend that meeting.
I'm going to let Val do it this time because I've been having trouble again getting in on this darn iPad and getting into these meetings.
Okay.
So if Val wants to attend it, that's fine.
Okay.
Is that at 9 o'clock?
Yes, that's this Friday at 9, and it's scheduled to be a Zoom meeting.
Steve, she'll need an invite from.
Yeah, can somebody,
Aaron Rodabaugh.
Yes, I will follow up with Aaron. And
Okay.
you'll probably, Valerie, if you don't have a Zoom invite by say Thursday, let me know and I'll double
Okay.
check with him again, but I'll make sure I email him tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
hey, Steve,
Yes.
while we're on the landscape thing, since we talked, has anything been kind of done between Chuck and I and you?
As far as up at the stadium,
Well, just our whole conversation, has anything been, followed up on?
well, I know he's followed up with his guys and his crew. And as we've talked before, one of the areas specifically we really want to focus on is the stadium area. Making sure that,
Right.
all the weed eating is getting done around fences and those types of things. And then I'm not sure if he actually has a quote yet or not, but I know that per our conversation, we were looking at those storage buildings in the
Right.
southwest corner of the stadium. Now that the old visitor concession stand has been removed, that building is out of there. But the other three buildings, the colors don't match. And,
Right.
we've got a beautiful stadium, obviously a nice field house. We're going to have a nice concession restroom area. We've got a nice field. We've got a nice scoreboard. But those storage buildings are just not what they should be. And I know we need to take a look at either another coat of paint or vinyl siding or something there. I don't know if Chuck actually has quotes yet for that, but I know that that's something he was planning to do.
Okay.
Anything else?
Steve, Steve, this is Ron.
Yes.
Can you give us a quick update on what's our position relative to open enrollment right now? What's our overall position?
In terms of numbers, or it just
In terms of what are we accepting? What are we not accepting? Are we still accepting open enrollment? And so at what grade levels?
what we did is
Quick update.
we accepted all students who were already here under open enrollment and have been in the district. They were invited to reapply. Those students have been accepted. We did have a few students that did not reapply to continue on here in Amherst for next year. So we did do that, but we did not accept any new or additional open enrollment students. Separate.
Okay, what
separate from the
What,
one.
what happens in this case, Steve? We have a student that was an Amherst student for many years. I think she's now a junior, but they moved to Lorraine and they want to do open enrollment and keep the kid in Amherst schools. Does that kid qualify, or are we not accepting that student in a case like that?
Yeah, those cases are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And if I don't know if they've contacted Mr. Tellier or contacted the board office, but again, those situations are addressed on a case-by-case basis.
Well, my understanding is they did contact the board office. Let me see, and they didn't. They were saying that I'm looking at the email that I got. They went like a week ago and said they weren't taking any papers for open enrollment. They weren't taking any new applications for open enrollment, but she was already a student in Amherst.
Yes. Yeah, and we've had cases where we've accommodated situations like that, again, because they were already here as an Amherst student. Obviously, once they're here, we try to keep them here, but sometimes there are circumstances that that we do not accept. All open enrollment applications are reviewed on a year-to-year basis. So what I guess I would encourage, if a parent has a question or concern about that, please feel free to give them my phone number or email address and have them give me a call, and I'll be happy to talk with that parent personally.
All right, I'll have her do that. Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else, anyone? If not, I will take a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Rex moved and Teresa second. Any discussion about adjourning? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call, please.
Mr. Engel,
Aye.
Mrs. Gillis,
Aye.
Mr. Yakobozzi,
Aye.
Mr. Zappa,
Hi.
and Mrs. Snyder.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
Thank
you.
you.
Hi.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.